Welcome to One Up Fantasy, helping you one up the fantasy football competition. For the latest in Chicago sports news, visit ChiCitySports.com. And now, here are the hosts of One Up Fantasy, Stephen Johnson and Chris Jackle. Kaboom!
Happy Tuesday evening, one and all. Welcome into a brand new episode of One Up Fantasy here on ChiCitySports.com and the Tape Never Lies Network. I'm Stephen Johnson. He is Chris Jackle, and it is officially NFL Combine Week out in Indianapolis, not too far down the road from the Windy City, but nevertheless the road to the NFL Draft and a whole new batch of NFL rookies is just a couple weeks away from landing on NFL rosters. A little bit of a lineman heavy situation this year in 2022, but nevertheless, there's some talent to be talked about, and we're going to be breaking it all down here in the coming weeks. And why not start it off with quarterbacks? But before we get to all that, Mr. Jackal, how are you?
Mr. Johnson, I'm doing well. You know, it is Tuesday, like you said. I got the Mr. Rogers sweater on, so I'm, we're in the fantasy neighborhood, so I'm looking forward to talk quarterbacks with you. I'm not sure exactly how many you want to talk about and how much fantasy implications they have year one coming into 2022, but there are a couple guys that may get a little burn this year. But, it's 2022 season is here. I'm excited. There's a lot to talk about. We're Bears fans are excited. A nice little press conference today over there in Chi-Town. I'm assuming you're on location right now for the combine, right? You traveled. You brought the little gypsy wagon down there studio and
on a covered wagon and everything. I've never been to the combine. I hate that I haven't been. Because I've had the opportunity in the past and I've just never hopped on it. But it's one of those things where I feel like it'd be incredibly boring just to sit there and watch. I could be wrong. Like, even there's times you watch it on TV and you're just like, this is just filler for my day. That's ultimately what it is.
Dudes are just, trying to get after it. You're hoping something pops out during the 40-yard dash or whatnot. But, There's guys though that I think we need to pay attention to this year. I think we'll get to it as our off season here at One Up continues when we talk about some of the other position groups. But I know as we talked about, we were going to get into quarterbacks, and there are a couple I think that are worth talking about. I think some maybe even taken in one of the top 10 picks. Who knows? But as we get going here, I didn't know where you would like to start, but quarterbacks is the topic of conversation. If you have any questions, throw it in the chat and we will get to it. But as we continue, Mr. Johnson, what do you say?
It's a very odd year. I think for Bears fans in general, the consensus has been that if Justin Fields were in this class, he would be the number one quarterback in this class and arguably the number one overall selection in this class. So that being said, can you blame the Bears for going to get their guy last year? Absolutely not, because if they were stuck with the situation they were in this year, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be feeling as confident about the position overall. But we talked about this a little bit earlier on before the show kicked off here, and how many quarterbacks just could go in that first round of the NFL draft. Will somebody go top 10? The possibility is definitely there. A number that you threw out was 3. My initial response was a cringe.
Yeah.
But if you look at mock drafts just about everywhere, it's that 3 to 4 range, to the point where it's like, okay, there's arguably, we'll call it 8, maybe 9 quarterbacks I feel like are draftable, to where you could see them actually be like a feasible NFL player. But the 4 up top,
4 horsemen up top.
They wouldn't be 4 in probably any other draft class.
What if, I mean,
22.
You're right. What if Trevor Lawrence, there's guys, if they stuck around and came out next year, these guys would be 3rd round picks, but we're talking about Pickett going in the 1st round, people really looking at, Malik and looking at him as like a Lamar Jackson prototype and the potential's there. And that, I was surprised, coming out of Liberty and, he's been all over the map, but, with respects to the potential is what this draft is all about. Cause there's no sure ticket when you look at a guy and at the end of the day, no prospect is a sure thing, but there's a lot more ifs and buts and than there are, how do I say more pros or more cons than pros? Jesus, stumbling on my words here. But
it's some butts for coconuts. No,
you said that. I don't even know what the fuck that meant, but I
can't remember where that came from. But
but Malik Willis
seems to be the guy in this class. He's gonna be the first quarterback off the board, which I see the hype. The argument from the fantasy perspective is he is the next Konami code quarterback that can unlock that scoring potential in fantasy leagues, both through the air and on the ground. The Senior Bowl was fantastic for Malik Willis. It really upped his stock as well. And the question becomes, where exactly does he go? Does he go top 5? I'd be shocked if he did. I think he's going to fall probably more into that late top 10 range. Probably the first option off the board is Atlanta. Matty Ice is starting to
I think Atlanta's definitely in the mix there. I think Denver at 9 is definitely someone to think about as well. If they don't go with that route and they say they go with maybe, I don't want to say a safer bet, but maybe if they look at Pickett and go, and you see him going before Willis, I'm sorry. It's up in the air, and that just speaks to the draft itself. I think, regarding quarterbacks and it's not slim pickings. The biggest boomer bust, I think, is Malik Willis, though. I think he's the guy. And I think GMs around the league are looking at that as well. Do you see him as more of a Lamar Jackson, or do you see him as more a Deshaun Watson, just like a bigger, a stronger, faster version, prototype style of play as a quarterback?
The thing I struggle about with him is just the fact he reminds me a lot of like a Geno Smith type player.
Jesus.
And I just where you're going to have those guys.
What about Jalen Hurts?
And there's been a lot of comparisons to Jalen Hurts. The Ringer actually has the shades of Jalen Hurts with turbo boosters. I don't exactly know what that means. What turbo boosters?
I'm not a genius here, Stephen, but I would think they're saying he's kind of faster than Jalen Hurts is now. But
a lot of athleticism. Obviously, he showed a lot of what he could do. But the thing that I always struggle with those smaller school quarterbacks is just the level of competition.
True.
That they put up with, and just how they're going to compare once they get to a level like the NFL, and seeing that type of talent on the other side of the ball. But you break down, what he was able to do during his time at Liberty, 5,000 yards and 47 touchdowns in 2 years. And meanwhile, he's running for 1,800 yards and 27 touchdowns on the ground. Those are video game numbers.
True.
And it's obviously something they can get people really hyped over, just with the fact that he was able to do it. And the fact that, again, he did pretty damn well at the Senior Bowl to really boost himself up there as that number one guy. I don't want to get into the height argument. I do think that's going to knock him a little bit, and I just think that there's going to be those growing pains to the point
he's
where
6'1", 225. So you think
I think
program
that's
height, and we're looking at like a 5'11"?
I'd say 6 foot is
okay.
probably
I want to
what
push
we're
back a
looking
little
at.
bit too, though, and just
All right.
regarding his 2021 season, I felt he could have had better numbers, playing at Liberty. He threw for, 2,800 yards. He rushed for 850. He had 40 total touchdowns. I mean, so he had 27 in the air. He had 13 on the ground. So you're right. That right there is, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs type numbers, with respects to touchdowns. But he threw 12 interceptions, and he's got the big arm, but there's things that he needs to work on. Definitely his footwork. He's got that athleticism, but some of those mechanics that he definitely needs to, to polish as he makes that jump to the next level. I am a little nervous about that, especially if he gets thrown to the fire early on. If he ends up going to a team like Pittsburgh or a team like Denver that don't end up getting a veteran quarterback and they get kind of stuck in a position where he ends up getting meaningful snaps, that's not a good sign for either of those teams if that's happening. But I think those will be the glaring issues, and then we're going to be having a much different conversation come 2023. But if he gets a chance to sit, learn, and work on those things that I just talked about, I think you could see him make a nice little transition to the league.
Yeah, and I guess just to add where my concern is, I guess, into those other things that I mentioned as well. You look at, and you kind of mentioned like the footwork. I mean, he was taking sacks at a rather alarming rate as well at Liberty, and thinking that, chances are he's going to go to a crummier team. I mean, that first quarterback off the board, higher pick, usually worse team.
So I'm going to throw a couple of teams out there. And you got
All right.
Broncos, Commanders, Steelers, Saints. I mean, maybe the Titans take a stab, late at the 26th spot and say, you know what, maybe we'll let him sit behind Tannehill, or if we can pull in somebody else, and have him for the future.
I think of those teams, the Steelers. I think the Broncos are going to go and trade for somebody, whether that's an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson. I don't see them going the rookie route again, especially with the way that team is built.
Green Bay now.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it.
Whatever.
Nope. Nope. I'd say the Steelers, if not probably Washington, because Washington's sitting there at what, 11?
They got 11.
So, yep. I mean, they're right there. So I think that those are the most feasible landing spots for him. And again, neither team with really a great offensive line. And for Washington's sake, key pieces along that offensive line that are free agents this offseason. And so in talking about the footwork, talking about the fact that, Willis is taking sacks at a rather alarming rate, you don't want him to get those skittish feet and, try and make plays out of the pocket with his legs before letting plays develop. And I think that's one of the biggest things that he's going to struggle with. Just kind of putting, 2 and 2 together with what we've seen at Liberty in the tape. And again, the potential is there. You can't argue that. The athleticism is there. It's just being able to put it all together. It wouldn't shock me if we're talking about a guy that's going to have 2 or 3 years down the line before he becomes a reliable option in the fantasy game. I mean, almost to the point of like what we saw with Jalen Hurts, where, rookie season, okay.
Some packages put together, he gets in the game. Yeah, kind of feeling it out,
Yeah, and then maybe he has the opportunity to make that jump and be a formidable guy. But again, we saw what Jalen Hurts was able to do and what he wasn't able to do specifically through the air, where, if it wasn't for the running game that Jalen Hurts brought to the field, he'd be a terrible fantasy quarterback, plain and simple. And so really this could be a very well put together comparison, saying with turbo boosters, here's Jalen Hurts.
And this is a top 10 pick ultimately, could be. And that's which just speaks to how desperate teams are to try to find the next big thing, and it also speaks to how we are lucky and fortunate enough to have JF1 as our QB1 up in Chi-Town. And it just back to, speaking of the sacks, it's like, you're playing at Liberty. The talent is obviously not what we're seeing in other quarterbacks schedules that, in their competition. it just speaks to his ability to read pass coverages. And, that's only going to get harder in the NFL. So it's, I'm starting to see, I almost feel like Pickett is the better pick for kind of an immediate return on the fantasy side, but also for a team that really needs somebody to try to get in there and get under center. I think I would be definitely looking at Mr. Pickett as QB1 for the quarterbacks in this year's 2022 draft. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, he's
segueing to the next guy.
Absolutely. He's definitely the more traditional guy, I guess, from what you envision a quarterback to be, really being able to get through the pocket, get the signals down to where they need to be and get things rolling. And again, it's one of the things that just worries me about Pickett. It's just like this meteoric rise out of nowhere where you get this all of a sudden just vault and here's Kenny Pickett, and no one was necessarily talking about him.
4,300 yards in the air, man. Jesus.
Yeah.
Rushed for 230, 47 touchdowns, 7 interceptions.
A little bit older. Not necessarily.
23. Will be 24 June
6th. God, who's the guy the Browns picked who's 27 years old?
Oh my God.
Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
That's gonna drive me nuts.
Is that weird?
Yeah. I mean, obviously not that old. But
Chris Heineke.
For what he is and what he can do, it's funny. I've already heard people complain about the hand size.
This is a good point. And I heard Bruce Arians actually talk about that today on McAfee, and he said, Brady wore 2 gloves. There's somebody else that wears 2 gloves in the league now, Teddy Bridgewater. It's, the small hands thing is what it is. And they were talking about Pickett, and Arians is like, that motherfucker can sling it, so I trust his acumen over some of the, fantasy pundits out there that are saying, oh, the hands are too small, or the NFL pundits, not just necessarily the fantasy pundits. So, unless you're a hands guy, or you're like that Whopper commercial guy with.
So yeah, you see, I got these tiny hands.
Yeah, I got you over there.
I mean, it
tiny hands, tiny gloves.
The thing that just I guess the worries. I'm going to be negative Nancy here today, apparently.
Swinky, that's it.
The fact that, again, despite him, being old, the fact that it took him more or less 5 years to really make an impact in the game. I mean, we're talking about a redshirt senior here, then all of a sudden blows up for 4,300 yards and 42 touchdowns. And it's just weird. Like, I think, what was it, the Senior Bowl, he didn't want to have his hands measured because he's double jointed, and like it's almost like he's get these head games going, and it's not something that you necessarily want to have.
But he came in 3rd in the fucking Heisman ranking. I mean, the voting.
Exactly.
The guy can ball. I mean, I'm not worried. Come on, man. Just fucking whip your hands out. What are we doing here? Oh my goodness.
It's I could be way off base, but again, it's just one of those situations where, again, things just kind of build up. But if you're looking for that prototypical passer in a pro style, and you don't necessarily want him taking off and doing all these crazy things with his legs, he is the guy. And again, we talked about some of those teams floating there in that 8 to 12 pick window. I think he makes a lot of sense for Atlanta. In all honesty,
Carolina at 6.
I think that's high. I think that's really high.
I've read a couple mocks seeing him go there. So I was I made a little note. I'm like, I'm going to ask Mr. Johnson what he thought about this. Denver at 9, Commanders at 11. But I think Atlanta, and they kind of say that he's almost like a Matt Ryan type.
Right.
I could see that comparison. Was he a one-hit wonder though? I mean, he was not even in the top 4 or 5 going into this season in terms of quarterback rankings for draft prospects. And now here he is. He arguably the number 1 quarterback prospect, so
Yeah,
I don't
and
know, man.
I'm seeing here in the comments from Michael, Burrow is a fifth-year senior. What's the point? You know, I mean, yeah, you can make the comparisons that, yeah, there were 5 years in there for Joe Burrow,
Yeah.
but you look at the trajectory of where Kenny Pickett was. There was no transfer involved. There was no issues with that, but you go for 5 straight years with Pitt. Your touchdown to interception ratios as the starter in those years, you have 12-6, 13-9, 13-9, 42-7. Like it just the fact that, like, what changed, what was the difference maker for him? Was it just was it actual, like, changing the mechanics, the coaching, the play calling? You know, what was it there? It was just something that was just a little more odd to the fact where he really wasn't showing any type of production that made you say this is an NFL quarterback.
You question his ceiling,
To
right? I mean,
right.
you start to question that, and then then as a draft prospect, you're like, well, if you have a questionable ceiling and you've already kind of maxed out here, what are we going to get at you at the next level? You know?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, Pat Narduzzi's been there for what? How many years? I think he's been there. So I think he's been there Kenny Pickett's entire career. I could be wrong. But again, you talk about prototypical quarterbacks.
Yeah.
He has the arm. You know, he did show some things, but it's just that limited body of work and the fact that it really never came together as a starter prior to this year, where you just kind of scratch your head and wonder, okay, where did it all come together? Is the biggest thing for me. But for you, he is the QB1.
For you or for me?
For you.
I think I like, so as I kind of criticized him earlier before you said that, you know, and I said, was it a one-hit wonder? Or, you know, as we talk about it, is he the guy that just made that massive jump? And this is a sign of what's going to come for him. You know, I think based on the trajectory, the football IQ, that acumen, I think, is much higher than the other prospects in the, you know, Howell or Corral. I mean, those guys were 1 and 2 going into 2022, but he is kind of just, you know, Pickett came 2 in passing and 2 in, you know, yards and touchdowns this year. He put up a monster season in a big conference. I kind of feel that he is my QB1 at this point, based on, I think, leading into, you know, 2022, what he could do right off the bat for an NFL team. But Willis could blossom later on and have a better career. But I think right now, I think Pickett's going to be drafted higher than Willis.
Man, I wouldn't be shocked at all if that were the case, which is again, just based on the teams that are in there. And obviously there's a lot of opportunity for teams to pop up and you know, draft their guy. You know, we talked about Pittsburgh being one of those spots as a potential. I believe they're at 20th right now.
Yep.
Don't quote me on that. 20th, am I right?
Pittsburgh is at 20. Yes.
Okay. I mean, kind of a similar trade to what the Bears did last year, where they'd have to probably jump up into that 8 to 11 range, depending on if they really fall in love with the guy out of the combine this week, or any additional research that they do on said QBs for the season, or if they're not able to get a guy. There was one interesting comment that I did see in here. Who was it? Who said it back up here? Michael Thomas earlier on. Wouldn't Winston to the Steelers be a good fit?
I think Winston's going to resign with the Saints. Jameis.
I like. Does that move like do anything for you? It just feels like I feel like that's a guy they just have to move on from after everything. Like, it just never really.
He wasn't bad
going.
though last year. I mean, he has the potential, and I think he's not going to break the bank. And then, considering their cap situation, you know, I think maybe he is the guy they bring back on a 1-year deal, prove it, and then we can talk about it in 2023. But you know, then again, anything can happen in the NFL. We've seen that as we've gone along, and especially in 2021. I did want to add regarding Pickett, he benefited from that extra year of eligibility with respects to COVID. So that is part of the reason why he ended up being a late, not necessarily a late bloomer, but being 23, going to be 24 heading into the season. So I just wanted to throw that little caveat, little tidbit of information, but yeah, and I think just to your point about getting back into the draft, you have the Giants with a couple of picks, you have the Jets. So there's some teams with multiple first round picks that may be willing to move to capitalize and even get more picks on their end. So you may see it. One or two teams fight to get into that top 10 to get Willis or Pickett, or maybe they like one of the other mofos we're going to talk about. But, I'd be surprised. But, people did, they liked a couple of the quarterbacks going into this, collegiate season in 2021. Matt Corral over at Ole Miss and what's his face?
Should he be the next one we talk about here?
It's up to you. Who do you like? Do you like Howell or do you like Corral better?
I think Corral is the higher end prospect in terms of what his ceiling is. Let's go.
He was the number 1 QB coming into the season, right?
Yeah, and again, kind of a wild child, I guess, in terms of his play. We have Kenny Pickett, who's that prototypical pocket passer. We've got Malik Willis on the other end, who's ready to take off with it, and then you have Matt Corral, that's kind of this in between, where he's got an arm, but he is not afraid to take off and run with the ball, as you'll look at the last 2 years at Ole Miss, and honestly ended the season with a relatively scary injury that might have sent his draft stock falling. But nevertheless, 614 yards rushing in 2021, 506 rushing yards in 2020 during the truncated season. But meanwhile, again, fantastic passing numbers. This past year, 3,300 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Year before, 3,300 yards again, 29 touchdowns, 14
in the
interceptions.
SEC too.
Yes.
Out.
And, Ole Miss, not as great as they once were.
Not bad either, though.
But still had a 10-3 season last year. Lost in the Sugar Bowl. Lane Kiffin turning things around after a 5-5 first stop in 2020. But again, you see this progression out of Matt Corral, and I'm intrigued by Matt Corral. Yeah. There's something about him where I think in the right system, if you give him a team that has some weapons, and we just talked about them not too long ago, but the New Orleans Saints, where I feel like he could really drop into that situation, be a more reliable option than Jameis Winston, both passing and even running with the ball. And Jameis Winston, not necessarily a runner by any means, but again, that dual threat ability that does better than what they are dealing with Taysom Hill and whatever that situation is in that gigantic contract. I'm assuming he's being cut because they owe him like $40 million,
right? Yeah, it's a wild thing.
Hands down the most bizarre contract on
4 years, $160 million. I think all years are voidable. So I don't understand any of that, but I like Corral, and I think that would be a great spot for him. I think there are some weapons there. They have a running back. I think that if they lose Thomas, not that that's a huge thing, but they may look to replace him in the draft as well. Corral has a big arm. He's accurate. They say he's extremely coachable. He loves the game, and he is a student of the game, and I think that they say he's got a quick release. So, depending on that offensive line, that could save him, maybe a little bit more durability. He's not going to take a hit all the time if he can actually get that ball out of there, instead of being, the opposite of Malik Willis. Didn't take many sacks at college. They are worried about his size, though. They say he's 6'1", and as we just talked about with Willis. Willis, being 5'11", possibly listed as 6'1", I don't know. It's Going to need to be able to move around in the pocket a little better is one of the things they talk about with respects to his game right now. But I think that's a skill and that you can actually improve on at the next level with right coaching. And I think he could be a guy that's a more plug and play, played in a pro system with Kiffin. And so I think there's a chance that if, to your point, if he does get some meaningful reps, he could be a guy that actually puts up some numbers on the fantasy side. If you needed somebody like an last-ditch effort. But, at the same time, we are talking about some projects or diamonds in the rough here for 2022. But you could see a guy like that in 2023, 24, a dynasty stash and, put him on your taxi squad for for a year or two. And next thing you know, you're looking at somebody that could actually do something for you at the quarterback or super flex spot.
Yeah. And again, I think fit is going to be everything for his progression. I said it once, I'll say it again. Also the thing, and this is just Lane Kiffin, and there's Lane Kiffin written all over it. So many run pass options.
Oh yeah, a lot
of Lane Kiffin systems. And so it then turns into a situation where if he doesn't get paired up with an offensive coordinator or a head coach who likes that style of play on offense, there could be a significantly higher learning curve here for Matt Corral. And again, it's something that, could keep him from being an immediate impact guy to being a guy maybe along the lines of, hey, let's let you sit 1 or 2 years, really get your feet wet before, we roll you out there. But again, the question becomes, how many times are we really going to see these quarterbacks that, have the opportunity to sit for 1 year, if not multiple years, to really learn the system, really get things going. We heard this week, like if Matt Nagy got his way, Justin Fields would have never seen the field. You see the situation in Green Bay with Jordan Love, the situation in San Francisco with Trey Lance, who was a top 5 pick just a year ago and really was only thrown into it because of injury and some special packages that were created just for him. And there's been a lot of question on whether or not he's ready to take the reins in San Francisco.
Maybe back again. Who knows?
Undergoing surgery. Apparently won't be ready until July. So
they said to be able to work out, you'll be good to go for the start of the season.
So
guys broken all the time, huh?
Yeah.
Dr. Garoppolo at this point.
Yeah, and
I read an interesting comp on Matt. They did say that he is a Mitchell Trubisky player or a Mitchell Trubisky quarterback, but with a better arm. I'm like, okay, I don't really see that. But nonetheless, I just wanted to add that as a Bears show. And Mitchell Trubisky is getting more hype than the rest of the quarterback class for 2022. So he will definitely play a hell of a lot more this year than any of the guys drafted this year.
God.
I'm actually excited to see what happens for him. I hope he lands in a spot and gets a chance to win some games and tell Matt Nagy to go fucking pound sand.
I get the narrative so far this offseason has been just how terrible Matt Nagy was at developing players. I don't disagree with that. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But to then have it translate into Mitchell Trubisky's a great quarterback, he's going to be a starter in the league again, is such a roadmap.
Well, it just speaks to how shitty Nagy was as a head coach. If teams are willing to really invest millions of dollars in him again, to be like, maybe it was fucking Nagy and he was just that bad of an offensive fucking guru, as he said he was. He fucking hated Mitch from what it sounds like.
Oh, 100% did. He's ghosting him in meetings, saying things about him. It's just so much negativity around that. But
that's why he's gone.
It's like that meme of Charlie and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he's got that map up on the wall
and
he's trying to explain what's happening. Like that's the same thing with people trying to explain that Mitchell Trubisky is an NFL starting quarterback. It just isn't there. Yeah, can he be a decent backup? Absolutely. But the inaccuracies that Mitch had in throwing the ball while he was here is something that can't go overlooked, and it continuously does.
Stop that. No Mitch slander on this show, Stephen. No Mitchell Trubisky slander here.
I've said my piece.
All right, fine. It's your fucking show, so you can say that. All right, fine. But I hope he starts somewhere and wins 10 games.
As long as it's not Green Bay.
No, well, he ain't gonna go there. The fucking,
if Rodgers leaves, you think they're gonna stick with if Rodgers ends up leaving, you think they're gonna go with Jordan Love? They're gonna try and corral the first thing in, to make sure that doesn't happen.
They're gonna draft. They're gonna draft Sam Howell.
Oh God. It's funny. I'm seeing mock drafts where he's not the fourth quarterback off the board. Where the fourth quarterback off the board is Desmond Ritter out of Cincinnati. I don't like that. I don't know about you. I don't like the
next three.
I mean, it gets ugly quick.
Yeah. Carson Strong at 6.
Nevada, Kent State, and Dustin Crum. Like there's so many small school quarterbacks this year. There's really not that main guy.
Let's talk about Howell though. I mean, he was a guy that was looking at, a year or two ago, potential, ranked the top of the 2022 quarterback class.
Right.
Mitch Trubisky 2.0 over there at UNC. As we just talked about him. In 2021, he threw for 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Rushed for 828 yards with 11 TDs. I mean, those are pretty solid numbers.
They are.
He's athletic, but he needs to grow, man. He needs, he dealt with once he lost kind of his skill players at UNC, he just wasn't the same. And I think the quarterback should make your players better, especially if he's a leader and is able to perform, especially if you're looking to get that out of the next level. And he didn't do that at UNC.
Relied a lot more on his legs.
Yeah, you're right.
In his final year,
and I think that hurt him, and that's why he fell.
Yeah, I mean that's a very fair point to what he was able to do. But I mean, you lose Michael Carter and Javonte Williams. That's a hurt. That is a hurt.
True.
Daz Newsome as well. We're talk about a bear. Daz Newsome.
Yes, sir.
If he'll do anything this year, but he did some pretty damn good things in that North Carolina system, and so there were some serious hits and really it wasn't fulfilled.
Do you have his 2020 numbers in front of you by any chance?
Yes, I do.
They say that you put all your money and stock into his 2020 season and look at 2021 as just like a anomaly. Because he had 3 years of put up decent numbers at UNC as a starter. But what was his numbers in 2020?
2020, he threw for 3,500 yards, almost 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns and 7 interceptions on 68% passing.
Okay.
Pretty solid.
Yeah.
Pretty solid.
Okay.
2021, 62%, 3,000 yards. So about 500 less than he did in 2020, but a 24-9 touchdown to interception ratio. Still not bad by any means.
No.
So don't get us wrong there. But again, you can even kind of dial it back to his freshman year because he started his freshman year. We're talking a 3-year starter in Sam Howell here. And again, 3,600 yards. He threw for the most yards his freshman year. Threw for his most touchdowns, 38 his freshman year. But the passing percentage was its lowest at 61%. But that being said, he had the most attempts by far, almost 80 more attempts than either his 2020 or 2021 season. So he did have that going for him as well. That North Carolina team wasn't necessarily that good his freshman year, and had to do a lot to really get things rolling. I believe they was a 7-6 season. I want to say, because they played 13 games, 7-6. To again, very up and down, found themselves in a hole more often than not. It's I don't know. He's one of those guys I just struggle to rank consistently. Where would I be shocked if he falls into the second round? Not at all.
No,
Would I be shocked if somebody jumps up to grab him ahead of one of
no.
these three other quarterbacks that we've talked about already? Not at all.
But look at
He's. I think it's almost impossible to feel confident in predicting where he is going to go come draft night.
yeah, I couldn't disagree, or I couldn't agree more. I think you're looking at maybe the Titans at 26, possibly reaching for a quarterback here. Maybe this is where he falls. The Bucks at 27, Panthers at 38, Falcons at 43. And those are some of the teams that have those earlier picks that if they want to wait and think that maybe Howell's the guy and they look at 2020 as more the thing as 2021. But, some of the people say, and in watching him, they look at him and compare him to like a Baker Mayfield style of quarterback in the NFL. And that's not exactly a ringing endorsement, but serviceable. But, we're talking – we're also talking about a second round possible quarterback. Yeah. That may not give you any fantasy relevance for a couple of years, but there's a chance that he actually may see some meaningful snaps. Arians did say today that he likes Kyle Trask a lot. He thinks he's a big, strong quarterback, and there's a reason they drafted him last year. And him learning and playing with Brady this past season is something that he thought was invaluable. I thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit he threw out there going into their 2022 season.
I also got to remember this is the guy that led us astray on Keyshawn Vaughn 2 years ago in that backfield. So I take everything that Bruce Arians says with a very, very, very.
What are you trying to say? He's a snake oil salesman?
Maybe.
Okay. It's got beachfront property in Wyoming for you and Phil.
But I guess to that point, 27. The Bucks at 27.
Yeah.
I mean that's a landing spot, and the Lions at 32. You talked about Desmond Ridder here in this draft for the Ringer, but I think that having Sam Howell there and the fact that the Lions doubling up on that first round selection in the trade with Matt Stafford to the Rams, getting that last pick in the first round, obviously picking a quarterback at number 2 this year is an unheard of situation with the fact that the talent just isn't there. But at 32, all bets are off to the point where, if they do want to roll with Jared Goff for one more year because they know they're going to suck, which, the Lions aren't going to be good again. I don't think there's going to be any situation in which the Lions are good. And then you wait it out for that 2023 class that gets a little bit better at the quarterback position and just kind of build up some of the other spots, whether it's the offensive line again after you get Sewell a year ago, or if you go and shore up the defense that had its fair share of holes as well, and then wait for that quarterback again. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but it feels like that's a spot that Sam Howell could potentially fall to if he doesn't have somebody fall in love with him during this process here in the next week and over the course of the trainings up until we get to draft day.
That's actually a pretty sneaky pick there. I think, like you said, holding 2 first-round picks, not a bad move. You can, definitely do something to your line in that second pick there. You might see the fucking Lions trade down and try to even get more picks. They got so much work to do that, but who the fuck knows who's running the show over there, Dan Campbell or, whoever. But, yeah, exactly. But, Howell would not be a bad pick. They got, I think one more year of golf probably until it really doesn't hurt to let him go. So you let Howell just get used to the game and, and learn just the biz, and next thing you know, hey, you got a new starter on a rookie deal, second round money. And if you get anything out of him, that's something to build on. Young receiving core with Amon St. Brown, and hey, and DeAndre Swift in that PPR league, you got some fantasy monsters, man. And as you brought up Ridder, do you want to bring him up into the mix as like to round out the top 5, or do you have Carson? Do you have Carson Strong rated higher than Desmond Ritter? There may be
I
a
don't
couple
like
other
that.
guys you like better than either of those.
I mean, there's a few guys you could go with. I don't like Carson Strong at all.
Oh, me neither.
Like there's, I mean, yeah, he's got that size, he's got that arm talent, but like he is literally Jordan Love 2.0.
Negative
Same school and
208
everything.
rushing yards. Negative 208 rushing yards.
Oh man, it just there's just something that just screams Jordan Love 2.0 to me.
This dude's broken. His knee is all fucked up, though. I think, you know, Mr. Strong's knee isn't that fucking strong, and he's, you know, I think that's part of the reason he's just going to slide down draft boards, you know, and we'll see as the medicals come out on him and what that means for his draft status and, you know, in terms of where he's going to fall. But big arm, good pocket, you know, decent pocket presence. He's aggressive. He's experienced, but durability is the issue with him, right? I just talked about the knee. You know, despite having a big arm, you know, he's not all that, you know, not all that accurate on the deep pass. So, you know, sometimes gets stuck on that first read too, from what I just kind of jotted down regarding Mr. Strong. And I don't know if we're talking about him or Ritter here, so I kind of jumped all over the board here, Mr. Johnson.
I'd say that Strong is probably QB6 out of this group.
All right.
So let's talk about Desmond Ritter.
Yeah, sure. Cincinnati.
I mean, he's had a unique senior year, to say the least. The Cincinnati Bearcats, given the collegiate world a run for its money, and making the playoff and really get things rolling there. They got their asses handed to them, but nevertheless,
Tostitos Bowl years ago when they won the Big East, there was fucking pandemonium out here in Connecticut, and then they played a real team, and it was like, oh yeah, that's college football.
It's
sorry. I just had to share that. No,
you're right. It's you can pull up a lot of comparisons. It's funny because I was thinking about that UConn team too. Whatever the UConn football program is doing these days. But you know, it's there could be something to be said about what Desmond Ritter has done. Again, another 4-year starter. In college, the years prior.
Yeah, what was his 2020?
So 2020, 10 games, 2,200 yards. Almost, he was 4 away from 2,300 yards. So say 2,300 yards, 19 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. The 2 years before that are almost identical, like to really? A T identical. 2,100 yards, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions in 2019. 2018, 2,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So, you know, just floating in that range. Yeah. The touchdown to interception ratio being about the same when it all comes down to just the numbers. And then all of a sudden, here we are with this senior season coming out of nowhere, 3,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And so again, you find yourself asking, what happened the first 3 years? Why is this different now? It's another Kenny Pickett situation almost, but to the point where he saw actual competition and he clammed up terribly. Ugh. I mean, it's straight up Detroit's alley.
Got a little tight, didn't he? You know, in that big game, you know, and it's too bad, you know, there was that inconsistent ball placement, you know, he played on a really talented team, you know, and they played against some shitty comp, and he put up some decent numbers, you know, put up some good numbers. I don't want to say decent. They weren't, you know, but that's why he falls where he falls right now. And, you know, I think my pick for him is the Commanders. We are Commanders. Bump, 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 bump. You know, that's where he's going to end up, man. He's going to the Commanders, I think. You know, he's going to be like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick.
3rd or 4th? Wow.
Yeah.
That far down the list?
No, all right. So I think early 3rd round. I think the Commanders are going to take him.
Wow, so not even second round, not even giving him the benefit of the doubt. You get 3 quarterbacks off the board in round 1, and then you got to wait.
He could be 6. There's
that's true.
There's a couple guys, and I saw in the chat somebody liked. Where did I see it real quick? Where the hell did it go? He was on my list, and I took him off. Shit. Zap, Zappe. Zappe.
Zappe.
Is he on your list at all? Some people like him. I know George liked him, but I saw him on somebody's ranking as a potential prospect. But to that, it's all fucking a gamble. We're gonna see how the combine goes, and this list could change. We could do a show a month from now, before the draft, and we're looking at like 3 different names in the top 5 because somebody threw horribly, someone ran shitty, someone got hurt. So who knows? But, it'll be interesting to see as we get closer to that April draft where these guys actually fall. But I think it's safe to say the top 3 is kind of cemented. Would you agree with me on that? Not necessarily all going in the first round. But, I think the 1 through 3, those 3 guys with Willis, Pickett, and Corral is where we're looking for the top 3 guys.
Not
necessarily in that order. I'm just,
I mean, yes and no. Like, I want to say yes, but Sam Howell is going to sneak his way in there in some shape or form. Like, I just know it. That there's going to be somebody like almost to the point where the Bears picking Trubisky at 2, and everybody's saying, "Who the hell is this?" It's going to be the same thing with another UNC quarterback and another team. Someone's going to fall in love with him and what he was able to do at UNC and say, "That's my guy."
I'll be surprised.
Like I just he's one of those love or hate type situations. I feel like, and I mean you could really argue that about Kenny Pickett too, with the way that again the concern over the 1-year wonder type situation. But I think just because the talent in this class isn't as clear as what it was in previous years, there's a little bit more fluidity to what could occur on draft night. Especially when we're talking about a class where it is very possible if there are teams that have that need at quarterback, have to go and reach for their guy, it's going to bring a lot of talent at a lot of other positions down the board really quickly. And I think the one thing I think we could agree on here is that there is a serious cliff in this class, to the point where once that last guy is taken, do not touch that position for a long time during the draft. And Desmond Ritter's probably that cliff guy. So
that tier 1, that 1 through 5. I mean, actually I go tier 1 through 3. That tier 2, once you get to Ritter if you're looking at drafting Charlie Strong, take somebody else. Especially a dynasty, you're going to be able to pick him up off the waiver wire. No one's going to draft him in your dynasty, trying to dynasty drafts. I think right now,
unless it's a super flex 4th round.
All right. I'm quietly positioning myself in one of my dynasty leagues. I'm trying to make a move for Justin Fields right now, and I have the 6th pick in this year's upcoming draft. And so I sent my buddy a text, and I just said, "Any interest in Malik Willis?" Just trying to see what he thought. It's because he kept Fields on his taxi squad all year, and I have some decent quarterbacks. Yeah, he had a really good draft, this dude, and he's got me over the barrel knowing I'm a Bears fan, but at the same time, I'm wondering. I don't have a 2nd round.
This isn't the first time you've been in that situation because of that.
No. But I'm potentially looking to make a move here. And goodbye, Harisa. But we'll see what happens. I'll let you know if I put a proposal together to see what I can do. But you got to send an offer. You can't say, "Hey, would you trade so-and-so?" It's like, if you're going to try to trade for somebody, send a fucking offer. please. I had a guy saying, "Hey, you have AJ Dillon. Are you interested in moving him? Sure, send me an offer. Let's start there. Like, don't fucking ask me. Send me something. I'll let you know." The fuck.
So question for you, because I got a this is completely unrelated to anything we've spent the last hour talking about.
Okay.
So I got a very interesting trade offer earlier today.
Sweet, I love it already.
12-team league, super flex, tight end premium. Although there's no tight ends in this trade, it is DeAndre Hopkins, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Tony Pollard for Javonte Williams, the 11th pick, and then the 205, 206, and 207.
Wow. How'd you end up with all those picks?
Sheer luck.
Okay.
They all lined up. I have 4 straight picks in the second round. So I have 5. I have the 5th through the 8th pick in the second round. But
I think I might do that deal.
I have been hung up on this all day. And I don't know if the said person that offered me this is watching the show, because he's told me that he's watched before. You have Kamara.
Post a fucking comment, man.
Yeah, probably. Well, he's on Twitter, so we can't see the Twitter comments, unfortunately. You have Kamara. You don't know what's going to happen with the whole legal issue. Maybe Dalvin Cook, stud. Nook, old. Pollard depends on what happens with Ezekiel Elliott. On the flip side of that, Javonte Williams, opportunity, maybe. And then
doesn't like it.
A lot of draft picks. A lot of youth. Like, that's the thing. It's like
you're looking at wide receivers and a couple running backs.
Rookies. Yeah. 4 rookies is what I'm giving up for 2 26-year-old running backs, a 29-year-old wide receiver, and Tony Pollard, who's 23. And I keep leaning no, that I shouldn't do it.
Okay.
But it's one of those that makes you think, though, isn't it?
Oh no, I'm a guy that loves trades, and part of me is like, do it, because I'm like, you're going to have more draft picks next year. You can definitely get more picks and make more trades. You could trade Kamara during the season if you suck and try to recoup a couple picks for next year. You could definitely trade somebody else. I mean, you could do what you need to do to get some picks, but how often do you get a chance to? Are you going to draft a Alvin Kamara style back in the second round, or a
Dalvin Cook's brother?
You're going to take but is he going to get that burn and that you expect? And it's tough, man.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. He backed off of it. He removed it. Damn. I'm sad now. I waited on it too long. He got scared.
Offer it back. Fuck it.
No, here's the thing. I was like, that's just so many rookies, and it's studs, but it's a stud that might be facing a long-term suspension, and another stud that hasn't stayed healthy for a full season in a long time, and an old wide receiver. Just like all these things. But if Melvin Gordon comes back to Denver and ruins Javonte Williams' value, then I'm going to look like a moron. And it's very possible, because the GM's like, I'd really love to have him back today. And it's like, shut up. Don't say that.
Asshole. No.
You're not supposed to say that until after I make a decision. And that's to trade him, not to keep
Interesting proposal. I will say that's definitely this. Obviously it's a moot point now, but at that point, at that time, I might have hit accept on that one. I might have got antsy and looked to win it next year. If I was that close, and if those running backs were going to help me get, to the money next year, I'm probably going to try to pull the trigger. You can always wheel and deal. Come on, you're Stephen Johnson. You're fucking fans of football. Like, what are we doing here?
I know.
Got to go to Kmart.
Regret.
Let's go.
I'll live with regret. That's all there is to it.
Regrets. Not one.
No regrets.
Not one. I love it. I fucking love it.
Well,
quarterbacks, man. You fucking rattled them off, huh?
that we did. We got some more positions to get through, some running backs and some wide receivers in this 2022 class. Wide receiver is lit up this year with some of the opportunity that could be coming to an NFL team near you or fantasy team near you. If you're drafting in the dynasty realm or even waiting until redraft later on in the summer. But nevertheless, again, an interesting year, but there is talent there, and we're going to be here to break it all down to get you through this NFL offseason. So in the coming weeks, we'll do that. And then finally take a look at some mock drafts, maybe some best ball talk as well, since apparently across several platforms, you can already draft 2022. Feels like lighting money on fire or just playing with fun coupons, but you can do it if you really want to.
Yeah. How the hell do you do that?
I've
never done it.
Man, I did a little too much of it last year, and I highly regret it. I think I came out about even, so it was like keeping money in a bank is essentially what it came down to. But I digress. Tomorrow night, keeping it 100 here on Shy City Sports and TTNL. Dion Miller from ABC 7 Sports, and I believe a new host on ESPN 1000 in Chicago as well. And then Herb Howard also making his way and making a debut.
Should be a good show, man. We've been having some great guests, and I'm looking forward to a great March and April coming up with some fantastic guests, a lot of shows, Draft Mob, on Patreon. So check that out. There's some great content on there over at patreon.com or the tapeneverlies.com, which is directly right to TTNL's Patreon. Check out ShyCitySports.com for your latest and greatest in Shy City Sports, Chicago City, Shy City. Man, it's always a blast to get together with you on Tuesday night, Stephen. A break from the maniac, the maniacal lives we live outside of these little boxes we're inside of right now as we talk fantasy football. So I do appreciate your time every Tuesday night, my man.
Yep, same here. Always great talking football, no matter the season, even in the dead of the off season with not much going on. But hey, we'll have free agency to talk about as well coming up here in just 2 weeks. Free agency kicks off. We'll see if the Bears go hunting for some help for Mr. Justin Fields. So plenty to look forward to as the offseason rolls on. But that's going to do it here for us tonight on this episode of One Up Fantasy. For Chris Jackle, I'm Stephen Johnson. Thank you for watching or listening. If you're checking out the podcast version, have a fantastic rest of your week, and we will talk to you next Tuesday night. Take care, everybody.
Take care.